The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying fireflies. It was 3:02 a.m. in St. Mary's General Hospital, Boston. Snow drifted down outside the narrow window, but inside, Maya Brooks felt as though a volcano was splitting her open. Her dark hair stuck to her sweaty forehead. Her fingernails dug crescent moons into the steel bed rail. 18 hours. 18 hours since her water broke on the living room rug they couldn't afford to replace. 18 hours since Ryan said he'd be right behind her in his car. And now, with her insides tearing apart to deliver the twin boys she'd once believed would fix everything, she was alone. A nurse dabbed her forehead, whispering, "He's probably just stuck in traffic, honey." But Maya knew better. He hadn't called. He hadn't answered. And she'd seen the lipstick smear on his collar last Tuesday. She'd known. Deep down, she'd known. Pain slammed through her spine like lightning. She screamed so hard her throat felt raw. She thought of the baby clothes she'd folded alone, the crib she'd assembled with trembling hands at 7 months pregnant because Ryan had a thing at work. She thought of the tiny socks that would have no father to pull them on. Then the door opened. She looked up, eyes wild with hope. He came, but the man standing there was not the man she married. Ryan stumbled in, reeking of whiskey and stale smoke. His hair stuck up at odd angles. His eyes didn't hold regret, just disgust. "Look at you," he slurred, stepping closer. "Christ, Maya, you're a mess." She tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick, her throat dry. "Where were you?" He tossed an envelope onto the metal tray beside her for a line. It slid halfway to the floor. She could just make out the bold letters, divorce agreement. "You're leaving?" she rasped. He sneered, leaning so close she could smell the betrayal on his breath. "Nobody wants this, Maya. A screaming wife, 2 brats I didn't even want. You think anyone's gonna touch you now? You're ruined." A contraction crushed her words into a groan. Tears burned her eyes. The nurse gasped, "Sir, you need to leave. Now." Ryan laughed. It wasn't even human. He turned his back, walked to the door. "Good luck raising them alone," he said. "Sign the papers." And he was gone. Maya didn't cry. She couldn't. She was past tears. Instead, as the next contraction slammed through her, something ancient rose inside her. Something raw and bright. "He's gone. But I'm here. And they will never feel what I feel now." She gripped the rail tighter. The nurse squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, sweetheart." "I know," Maya whispered, jaw clenched as the next wave came. "They're here. They're mine." Hours later, as dawn broke gray over the city, the cries of Lucas and Liam Brooks filled that cold hospital room. They were pink and perfect and loud, and as Maya pressed them to her chest, she made her vow again, this time to their tiny ears. "You will never feel unloved. You will never be abandoned. Not by me." 5 winters crawled by like ghosts outside Maya's drafty apartment window. She still lived in South Boston, above the old bakery that smelled of burnt bread every morning. Rent was late more than once. Heat was a luxury that came and went with unpaid bills. But every morning, Maya rose in the dark, hands raw from dish soap, feet swollen from double shifts. When the boys were babies, she'd rock them to sleep on the battered couch while balancing a spreadsheet on her knee. Ryan's last words haunted her sometimes. "Nobody will want you." But when she looked down at Lucas and Liam, curled together like 2 puzzle pieces, she knew he was wrong. They wanted her, and that was enough. Lucas was the older twin by 12 minutes. Quiet, watchful, the boy who always knew when his mother needed a moment to breathe. Liam was the storm, loud, giggly, always charging into her arms, tracking mud across the floor she'd just mopped. They didn't know that sometimes Maya went to bed with an empty stomach. or that she'd once pawned her wedding ring for formula when the grocery money ran out. All they knew was that their mother was there. She was always there. At night, when the wind howled through the window cracks, they'd crawl into her bed in their mismatched pajamas. Lucas would whisper, "Mommy, are we safe?" She'd press a kiss to his hair. "Always." Liam would chime in, voice muffled by his teddy bear. "And you'll never leave?" "Never," Maya promised, even when her chest ached with exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. One morning, she stood at the sink, red hand submerged in soapy water, staring out at the alley behind the bakery. The boys sat at the kitchen table, if you could call it that, a wobbly thing she'd salvaged from a thrift store. They wore their oversized winter coats inside because the radiator hadn't worked for 3 days. But they didn't complain. They never did. "Mommy, look," Liam said, thrusting a crayon drawing in her direction. It was of the three of them, Maya with the superhero cape, holding the boys in each arm. She smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. "Is that me?" "Yeah, you're Supermom." Liam grinned, front tooth missing. Lucas added, "No monsters can get us when you're here." No monsters, Maya thought, pressing the drawing to her heart, except maybe the ones that lived in the unpaid bills piled on her nightstand, the ones that whispered she'd never be enough. She went back to scrubbing dishes. Another shift started in 2 hours, the diner this time. Cheap coffee, cracked vinyl booths, the smell of grease that clung to her hair long after she clocked out. But at least the tips were decent if she smiled enough. Some nights she dreamed of design school, the scholarship she'd given up when she got pregnant, the sketches she still did on the backs of receipts and napkins during her short breaks, rooms she'd never decorate, houses she'd never build. Focus, Maya. That was what she told herself every night. Focus on Lucas and Liam. Focus on the vow. It was a Tuesday in late February when fate cracked open her small, exhausted world. The night shift at the diner was dragging. A snowstorm had rolled in off the harbor, flakes tapping at the greasy windows. Maya wiped down the counter for the 5th time, her apron strings digging into her back. The bell over the door jingled, but not the usual drunk regulars or college kids looking for fries. No, this man was different. He shook the snow from his dark coat, ran a hand through his damp hair, and scanned the room like he didn't belong there. Because he didn't. His eyes landed on her, dark, clear, searching. He slid onto the counter stool closest to her register. "Coffee black," he said, his voice like velvet warmed over coals. She poured him a cup, her fingers brushing his for half a second as she handed it over. Electricity. God, get a grip, Maya, she told herself. "You don't look like you belong here," she said before she could stop herself. He laughed, a real laugh, not the forced kind her regulars gave when they flirted for an extra pancake. "Neither do you." She raised an eyebrow. "I work here." "Do you?" he asked, tilting his head to look past her. On the shelf behind the register, half hidden by old coffee tins and boxes of sugar packets, sat her battered sketchbook. He nodded toward it. "What's in there?" "Nothing," she lied too quickly. He leaned forward, eyes glinting like he already knew the truth. "Somehow I doubt that." She wiped her hands on her apron, her throat tight. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," he said, sipping the coffee. "I'm not, but maybe I will be." Before she could answer, an order bell dinged in the kitchen. She turned away, cheeks burning. When she looked back, he was gone, but there was a crisp business card tucked under his empty cup. Noah Sinclair. Sinclair Urban Development. She stared at the name, the gold-embossed letters shimmering under the neon diner lights. The richest man in the city had just sat at her counter like he was looking for something he'd lost. But what could he want from a waitress who couldn't even afford new boots for her boys? Maya slipped the card into her apron pocket. The vow thrummed in her chest again, the one she'd made in that hospital room. I will never let them feel unloved. I will never let them feel alone. She didn't know then that the man who'd sipped cheap coffee in her diner was about to turn her vow into something even bigger. Not just love, not just safety, but a home she could never have imagined. It was 2 days later when he came back. The same diner, the same stool. This time, Maya spotted him before the bell over the door even jingled. He looked tired, not in the way her regulars did, the bone-deep exhaustion of cheap labor and cheap beer, but the exhaustion of someone who carried the weight of an entire city on his shoulders. "Black coffee?" she asked, grabbing the pot before he could speak. He smiled. "You remember. Hard to forget the only billionaire who tips $20 on a $2 cup." He laughed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "I've been thinking about that notebook." She stiffened. "It's nothing. It's not. It's you," he said softly. Something in his tone made her throat tighten. She busied herself wiping down a perfectly clean counter. "What do you want, Mr. Sinclair?" "Noah," he corrected. "And maybe I want the same thing you do." She froze. "And what's that?" He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers like he was reading the words she'd never say out loud. A chance to build something that lasts. The bell above the door rang again. This time, the sound made Maya's heart lurch. 2 tiny whirlwinds burst through the diner's front entrance, one wearing a red beanie too big for his head, the other dragging a battered backpack that scraped the floor. "Mommy," Liam squealed, beelining for her. Lucas followed, more reserved, always scanning, always measuring. Noah turned to see them just as Liam launched himself into Maya's arms, nearly knocking her backward. She laughed, a sound so rare she almost startled herself. "Sorry," she said breathlessly, setting Liam down. "Snow day. Their babysitter canceled." Noah's eyes softened as he watched the boys. "They're yours." Maya bristled. "Yes. And before you ask, no, I don't need." "I wasn't going to ask if you needed help," Noah said gently, cutting her off. "I was going to say they're perfect." Lucas edged closer, his thumb hooked in his jacket pocket, his brown eyes flicking from Maya to Noah. "Who's that?" Noah offered his hand. "I'm Noah." Lucas glanced at it, but didn't take it. Instead, he asked a question that made Maya's chest twist. "Are you going to hurt my mom?" Noah's hand stilled in the air. His gaze shifted, steady and warm, landing on Lucas's small, stubborn face. "Never," he said. No hesitation, no flinch. Lucas seemed to study him for a second longer, then shrugged. "Okay." Liam, blissfully unbothered, had already climbed onto a bar stool and was pouring half a packet of sugar into Noah's abandoned coffee. "I like him," Liam announced, grinning. "Can we keep him, Mommy?" Maya flushed crimson. "Liam." But Noah just laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the empty diner with a warmth a broken heater could never manage. After a few minutes, the boys settled into a corner booth with a plate of leftover pancakes. Maya leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You didn't answer my question." Noah sipped his sugar-saturated coffee. "Which one? What do you want from me?" His eyes met hers, unwavering. "What if I said I don't want anything from you, but I do want something with you?" She scoffed. "Save the lines, Noah. I've heard every promise a man can make." "I'm not him," he said simply. Silence fell between them, broken only by Liam giggling as Lucas tried to pull maple syrup from his hair. Noah reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folded brochure. He slid it across the counter. Maya unfolded it with cautious fingers. A black and white sketch of an old, abandoned warehouse. exposed brick, broken windows, but a note at the bottom, Community Design Center. What is this? A project I'm starting, Noah said. A place for single parents to learn job skills, get childcare, start businesses. I need someone to help design it from the inside out. Someone who knows what it feels like to build a home with nothing but grit. Maya's laugh came out like a bark. So what? You want me to pick curtains for a billionaire's tax write-off? No, he said, leaning in closer. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I want you to help me build something real. Something that says people like you, people like us, deserve more than just survival. She folded the paper, her hands trembling. You don't even know me. Noah's eyes softened, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. Not yet, but I want to. Behind her, Liam's laughter rang out again, the sound of life, of promise. The vow she'd made all those years ago pulsed in her chest, reminding her who she was. She looked at Noah, this man who saw through the cracks she'd worked so hard to plaster over. And for the first time in 5 years, Maya didn't say no. The warehouse was nothing special from the outside. An old brick box on the edge of the city, windows boarded up, paint peeling like old skin. But when Noah pushed the creaking door open, a rush of cold air swept past them, stirring the dust into tiny whirlwinds. Lucas and Liam tiptoed behind Maya, their small boots squeaking on the cracked concrete floor. They looked so out of place here, too tiny, wide-eyed explorers in a broken cathedral of forgotten dreams. Noah walked ahead, his breath visible in the chilly air. It doesn't look like much now, he said, voice echoing off steel beams and graffiti-sprayed walls. But imagine it, open spaces, long tables where people can work, a safe play area for kids, art on the walls instead of mold. Maya hugged her arms around herself, shivering. And you think I'm the one to make that happen? He turned, hands in his pockets, studying her like a puzzle he wanted to solve slowly, piece by piece. I know you are. She looked at the boys. Liam was trying to catch a snowflake drifting in through a broken window. Lucas was running his fingertips along an old brick wall, like he could feel the stories hidden there. A lump rose in her throat. Why me, Noah? You could hire a whole firm for this. People with degrees, portfolios. He stepped closer, closing the gap between them until she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the scar on his cheekbone that the tabloids never mentioned. Because a designer can draw blueprints, he said quietly, but only someone who's lived it can draw hope. The words hit her chest like a soft hammer, cracking something she'd sealed up years ago. Liam bounded over, breathless. Mommy. Lucas found a secret room. Noah chuckled. Show me, buddy. The secret room turned out to be a storage closet, full of old office furniture and rusted shelves. But to the boys, it was treasure. Lucas tugged open a half-broken filing cabinet and found an ancient snow globe, missing half its water. Can I keep it? He asked shyly, looking at Maya, then at Noah. Noah shrugged. What do you think, Maya? She wanted to say no, to stay small, to stay safe. But Liam's eyes were shining. Lucas looked proud, and her chest ached with something warmer than fear. Sure, sweetheart, she said, brushing Lucas's hair off his forehead. You can keep it. When they walked back outside, dusk was settling in. Snow had started falling again, each flake catching in the boys' lashes. Noah watched them run ahead, spinning, throwing handfuls of powder into the frozen air. They're like you, Maya said before she could stop herself. He looked at her, surprised. Yeah, Lucas doesn't like anyone, she admitted. Not since. She stopped, her voice catching on old bruises. Noah didn't push. He just nodded, like he understood that some stories only came out when they were ready. You know they're going to get attached, right? She said, her words small, almost lost in the hush of falling snow. His voice was steady. Good. I want them to. They walked back to her car, an ancient Honda with duct tape on the bumper and a heater that wheezed like an old man. The boys piled into the back seat, still buzzing about their secret hideout. Maya turned to Noah, her keys rattling in her hand. Don't make promises to them you can't keep. He tilted his head, eyes darker in the evening light. I don't make promises I can't keep. She almost believed him. Almost. She reached for the door handle, but he caught her wrist, gently, his thumb brushing the inside of her palm. The warmth of it ran up her arm, all the way to the part of her heart that had forgotten how to beat for anyone but her boys. Let me take you all to dinner tomorrow, he said softly. Not fancy. Burgers. Fries. Let me show you I'm not him. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to say no. But the boys were watching in the rearview mirror, their little faces pressed to the glass. So she nodded, and as she drove away, her breath fogging up the windshield, she caught Noah's reflection in the side mirror, still standing there in the snow, watching her like a promise he refused to let fade. But the past is claws that never dull. 3 days later, the apartment buzzer startled her awake. It was past midnight. The boys were asleep, curled together in her bed because the heater had given up again. She padded barefoot to the intercom, heart pounding. Static crackled. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years slid through the speaker like oil. Maya. Her blood went cold. Ryan, she whispered. Open the door, he demanded. She didn't move. She pressed her palm flat against the cold wall, feeling the tremor in her bones. What do you want? You've got my sons in there, he slurred. I heard you're playing house with some rich piece of... Get out of here, she hissed, voice sharp enough to cut the dark. He laughed. They're mine, Maya. Always have been. You think you can replace me. A tiny creak behind her. She turned. Lucas was standing in the hallway, eyes wide, clutching his old teddy bear to his chest. Mommy, who is it? He asked. Maya pressed her finger to her lips. No one, baby. Go back to bed. But she knew Ryan wouldn't disappear this time. He'd smelled blood in the water, her happiness, her hope, and he was coming for it. When she finally locked the door, checked the windows twice, and tucked the boys back into bed, she sat at the tiny kitchen table and stared at her phone. Her thumb hovered over Noah's number for a long time. She didn't want to need him. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. Scared, small, vulnerable. But then she remembered Lucas's question, Are you going to hurt my mom? And Noah's answer, never. She pressed call. It rang once. Hey! His voice came through, warm and steady, like a blanket on a cold night. You okay? Her voice broke. No. When Maya opened her door the next morning, Noah was already there, leaning against the peeling hallway wall with 2 large coffee cups and a quiet storm brewing in his eyes. You didn't have to come, she said, voice hoarse from a night with no sleep. Noah stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the tiny apartment, the flickering radiator, the shoes lined up by the door, the boys' drawings taped to the fridge like sacred talismans. He set the coffees down on the counter and turned to her. Maya called me. I'm here. That's it. There's no deal to make. She wanted to fight him, to tell him she could handle Ryan alone like she always had, but her shoulders slumped under the weight of it all. He wants to see them. Noah's jaw clenched. After 5 years of silence, after handing you divorce papers in a hospital room, now he wants to play dad. Her eyes filled. I can't let him do this to them. I can't let him break what I built. Noah stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating off his chest. He reached up, cupping her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't know had fallen. "Then don't," he said simply. "You're not alone this time." That night, the four of them sat huddled on the faded couch. Lucas had his head on Noah's shoulder, fast asleep with the book slipping from his hand. Liam was curled into Maya's side, snoring softly with his fingers tangled in her sleeve. They looked like a portrait painted by someone who'd never believed in happy endings, but decided to try anyway. "Why are you here?" Maya whispered in the hush between breaths. Noah turned his head, resting his chin on Lucas's hair. "Because you're the bravest person I know." "That's not true." "Yes, it is," he said, his voice low but fierce. "You survived him. You built a life for them out of scraps. You kept a promise that would have broken anyone else." She closed her eyes. "I don't want them dragged through court. I don't want them to feel like pawns." Noah's hand found hers, warm and steady. "Then we do this the right way, with the best lawyers, the truth on our side, and me, always me." She opened her eyes, searching his face for doubt, for some crack in his calm. But all she found was the one thing she'd never known how to trust: consistency. The next weeks blurred into a storm of paperwork and court filings. Maya had never stepped foot inside a courtroom in her life, but now she sat beside a lawyer in a suit worth more than her annual salary, watching Ryan smirk across the aisle like a snake in a rented suit. Ryan claimed he'd been denied access. He painted himself as the victim of a manipulative woman who stole his sons. The words made Maya's stomach churn, but Noah squeezed her hand every time her voice threatened to shake. When the judge asked why she'd never sought child support, Maya's answer was simple: "He was never a father. I never wanted his money. I wanted peace." The opposing lawyer scoffed. "And now you live with a billionaire. Quite the upgrade." Maya lifted her chin. "Noah didn't save me. He sees me." It was the truth, spoken not for the judge but for her, a vow said out loud this time. Outside the courtroom, Ryan cornered her once, his breath sour with cheap coffee and stale spite. "You think this rich boy's gonna stick around once he gets bored of playing family?" he sneered. "You think your precious boys will still want you when they know the truth?" Maya's heart didn't race this time. She just looked him dead in the eye. "They already know the truth, Ryan. I'm the one who stayed." When she turned away, Noah was there, always there, waiting with arms open, a fortress she hadn't asked for but needed anyway. The final day in court, the boys were with a sitter. Maya sat alone on the stand, her palms slick with sweat under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. "Mrs. Brooks," the judge asked, voice like iron softened by age, "why do you believe the petitioner should not be granted visitation?" Maya's breath hitched. Then she saw it, a flicker of Lucas's quiet strength, Liam's wild laughter, Noah's steady hands. The vow she'd made at 3 a.m. 5 years ago. It all rose up, wrapping around her like armor. "Because I made a promise the night they were born," she said, her voice clear and stronger than she felt. "I promised they would never feel unwanted, that they would never feel abandoned or unloved, not for a single heartbeat. He left us in a delivery room, and he's never looked back. They have a father now, one who didn't have to be forced to love them, one who chose them day after day." Silence settled over the courtroom like a blessing. When she stepped down, Noah stood, pulling her into his arms in front of everyone. The lawyers, the judge, even Ryan's sneer. And Maya let him, because for once she didn't care who saw that she wasn't alone. Hours later, they sat together on a bench in the courthouse hallway, knees bumping, fingers tangled. When the judge returned, the words felt like bells ringing in Maya's chest. "Full custody remains with the mother. Visitation denied. Parental rights terminated." Ryan stormed out, shouting empty threats that didn't stick to Maya's skin the way they used to. She didn't watch him go. She didn't need to. Noah pulled her into him, pressing his forehead to hers. "It's over." She shook her head, tears slipping free. "No, it's finally beginning." They picked up the boys from the sitter's house just as the sun dipped behind the Boston skyline, painting the city in gold. Lucas climbed into the back seat, his eyes flicking to Noah and then to his mother. "Did you win?" he asked quietly. Maya turned to look at him, her voice catching. "We did. We're safe." Liam threw his arms around Noah's neck from the back seat, giggling. "Does this mean you're going to stay forever?" Noah looked at Maya, and then at the boys, and said the words that made her heart feel like it might finally burst from trying to hold so much hope. "I already did." That night, they all piled into the tiny living room for a celebratory dinner of pizza and paper plates. The boys fell asleep tangled together on the couch before the credits rolled on their movie. Maya stood at the window, looking out at the city lights flickering like distant stars. Noah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin on her shoulder. "Did you ever think it would feel like this?" he murmured. She shook her head, blinking back tears. "No, I didn't even know what this was." He turned her in his arms, pressing his forehead to hers. "Say it again." She knew what he meant. Not "I love you," that had become their steady heartbeat, but the words she'd spoken to herself when the world had abandoned her. So she whispered them for him, for the boys asleep in the next room, for the woman she'd clawed herself into becoming. "They will never feel unloved. Not while I breathe." Noah kissed her like a promise kept, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her for every storm that would ever come. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the crooked blinds in their tiny apartment, golden, soft, warm in a way that made Maya feel like maybe the whole world had shifted an inch closer to hope overnight. She stood at the stove in Noah's oversized t-shirt, her hair still tangled from sleep. The boys sat at the kitchen table. Lucas focused on lining up his crayons in perfect rainbow order, Liam humming to himself as he drew superheroes on the back of an old utility bill. Noah, barefoot and sleepy-eyed, was perched on the counter, sipping burnt diner coffee that tasted better now than any cup she'd ever poured. They were hers. This messy morning, this new life, these people who chose her every day. They were hers. Lucas looked up, serious as ever. "Mom, is it really over?" She set down her spatula, wiped her hands on a towel. "Yeah, baby, it's really over." Noah slid off the counter, walked over, pressed a kiss to her forehead. "It's just beginning." Liam wiggled in his chair. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow, too?" She laughed, the kind of laugh that came from the part of her that used to feel empty, but now felt like a room full of sunlight. "We can have pancakes every day if we want." Noah leaned in, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "What about your design dreams, Maya? You've given so much of yourself for everyone else. What about you?" She looked at the boys, one bold, one quiet, at the man who'd shown her what staying could really mean. And for the first time in years, she let herself imagine more than survival. "I want to build spaces that make people feel safe," she said softly. "Homes, shelters, community centers, places where the ones who've been hurt can find themselves again." He brushed his lips against hers. "Then let's build it." As the morning light poured in, the vow Maya made in that sterile hospital room 5 years ago pulsed through every breath she took. It was never about revenge. It was never about proving Ryan wrong. It was about proving herself right. They would never feel unloved. They would never feel unwanted. Because love wasn't something you begged for. It was something you built, piece by fragile piece, until it was strong enough to hold the whole world. Maya hadn't just kept her promise. She expanded it. She'd grown it into a new kind of home, one that could shelter her boys, her dreams, and every part of her that had once felt too broken to touch. And maybe, if you're listening to this right now, you needed to hear that too. Maybe you're holding your own secret vow, whispered to yourself in the dark when no one was there to hear it but you. If Maya's story gave you a spark of hope, do me a favor. Backhand index pointing right, leave a like. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe to this channel. Backhand index pointing right, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Your story matters. Your promise matters. And I promise you this, there's always a morning after the storm.